everybody. Welcome to In This Corner of the podcast. 123. We're joined by, of course, Lee Groves. We got a lot to unpack here, especially this is going to be a tribute for what's coming up, where I'm headed, the International Boxing Hall of Fame, year 35. We're going to talk about all of these folks here. Before we get to that, though, we've got some reviews and previews, and that means you're put to work early, Mr. Groves. Fire away.
Well, par for the course, I guess. So we're going to start with the big fight from last weekend, the rematch between Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor. A couple years ago, Catterall was denied the undisputed 140-pound title thanks to a split decision loss in Taylor's native Scotland. But last Saturday, the scene shifted to England, and Catterall got his revenge by scoring a wide unanimous decision victory. This was a nip and tuck affair throughout, but to me, Catterall, I think, turned the fight when he stunned Taylor in round 11 with a big left cross. And up to that point, Taylor had been winning the round, but the effects of that punch convinced me to score the round for Catterall, and Catterall ended up winning 115-113 on my scorecard. In the end, Catterall won by scores of 117-111 twice and 116-113. And after the fight, Bob Arum took the microphone and he declared, quote, "Those scorecards were a total disgrace, and I'll never, ever allow an American fighter to come here with the British board scoring the fight." That's my best Bob Arum. Okay, he's Josh Taylor's U.S.-based promoter, and he would stand to gain financially by stirring up some controversy for a possible third fight. But what did you think of Arum's rant, and what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, Bob, being Bob, they'll blame it on his age, but he's always been cantankerous since I've known him. He's been the benefit of so many, and we could rattle off 100 fights where his guys got the nod, perhaps when they shouldn't. So it's much about nothing. You pretty much nailed the fight in your breakdown of it prior to it. You know, and it went similar in a way to the Usyk Fury fight, you know, with Catterall sort of being Usyk-esque, winning early. And then, like Fury kind of took over, Taylor took over, and then in the end, it was Usyk, and in this case, Catterall. I think, you know, Josh is on that other side going down. They could probably fight 10 more times. It'd be very similar, but I think it was the right result.
It was the right result. And as for what's next, of course, Arum and Taylor want to have the rubber match, but Catterall is now targeting WBO titleist Teofimo Lopez, who is slated to defend against Canadian swarmer Steve Claggett on June 29th. Teofimo versus Catterall would be a pretty intriguing match because Taylor's the common opponent. Jack, in reality, should have had 2 victories over Taylor, and Teofimo beat Taylor to win his current belt. It does make sense. What do you think of that matchup?
Makes perfect sense, and you know, I think it would be a decent scrap with Catterall and Teofimo. I would, you know, from this vantage point, I would think Teofimo is a better fighter, has more ways to win, but you know, would probably be a decent fight.
Yeah, probably would be a decent fight. Now that's it for the reviews. Now we switch to the previews. And of course, we have that June 1st card in Saudi Arabia. And the main event is Deontay Wilder versus Wilder-Zhang. And you know what? The best nicknames are the ones that are rooted in truth. And there may be no more truer nickname matchup than the Bronze Bomber versus Big Bang. That's because they boast a combined 63 knockouts in their 69 wins. They're both coming off losses to Joseph Parker. And as of Monday, when we are taping, Zhang is a slight betting favorite because in his loss to Parker, he did score 2 knockdowns, including one in round 8. while Wilder looked every bit of his 38 years in losing a dismal decision to the New Zealander last December. Now, Wilder will always have that big right hand, and he'll be dangerous every second of the second scheduled 12 rounder. But will he let his hands go? Against Parker, he only averaged 17 punches a round, and he'll need to be much busier if he's going to beat Zhang, especially on points, should it get there. And as far, meanwhile, Zhang's biggest problem has been stamina.
Yeah.
He has faded badly in several of his recent fights, including the loss to Parker in March. If Wilder gets him to rounds 9 and 12, he has a chance of scoring the mild upset. But given Zhang's power in the left hand, getting to round 9 will be a big if. Remember, Wilder suffered 5 knockdowns in his second and third fights against Fury. And if Zhang hits him flush with that big left hand, I think he'll be taken out. Zhang by knockout.
Okay. We have anything else on that? You got some others on that card, right?
Well, that's true. Wilder versus Zhang is also part of the 5-on-5 card between Frank Warren's Queensberry Promotions and Eddie Hearns' Matchroom. And one of those fights pits mandatory challenger for the IBF, Philip Hrgovic, and former secondary titleist Daniel Dubois. Now, it was thought that this fight would fill the vacant IBF title. Usyk was poised to be stripped of that title, and this was the fight to fill that vacancy. But one report I received the night before taping, and we're taping on Monday right now, indicated that no belt may be on the line because Usyk asks for, and he may well have received, an exemption from the IBF and won't vacate the belt until 2025, meaning that the rematch, should it happen in October, will be for undisputed between Usyk and Fury. And as for the fight itself, I like Hrgovic by TKO because while both guys are big hitters, Hrgovic's chin is much better. So I'm going to go with that. And another fight of note, we'll see Dmitry Bivol defend his WBA light heavyweight title against Wilder-Zhang. Originally, Bivol was supposed to fight Artur Beterbiev for the undisputed light heavyweight title, but a ruptured meniscus in his knee forced Beterbiev off the card. Now, as for Zinad, he's quite the story. First, he is the first person from Libya ever to box professionally. Second, by fighting Bivol in Saudi Arabia, he'll be fighting in his 12th separate country. Third, he's a very confident guy. He has swagger. He likes to talk. And he's done it to opponents in the ring as well. And finally, he's fighting Bivol just 38 days after winning an IBF title eliminator against Jerome Pampalone in Australia. So there's a lot of miles that are going to be traveling there. And in that fight, he suffered a little cut under his left eye. So that may be a target for Bivol's lethal left jab. Based on what I've seen of Zinad, he's long, he's tall, he has a busy jab, he has good work rate. But, while he is pretty good, Bivol is elite. And he's also got exceptional defense. Zinad gets hit a little bit too easy for him to, I think, win the fight. Bivol hasn't scored a knockout in nearly 6 years, or more than 6 years, actually. He might get one here. Yeah. So Bivol, but either way, Bivol's going to win the fight.
Hopefully, we'll still get that Beterbiev fight. I haven't really seen any mention of when it might take place, given the injury that Beterbiev, was it a meniscus? I forgot what his injury.
Meniscus.
Yeah. So hopefully, because that's a fight, and the reason I think there's urgency for it to happen as soon as possible is Beterbiev's age.
He's pushing 40.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to bounce to some news items. Why don't we just mention right away what we just found out? It's not funny, but I sent you an email last night, right?
You did, and I'm not sure what exactly prompted this email. May have been a phone call that we just had, but
maybe it was. Well, I was hoping. But go ahead. Go ahead.
9:46 Eastern time, you sent me an email that said, "By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if Tyson versus Paul gets postponed." Hmm. And we found out just a couple of hours ago that on a flight from Miami to, I think it was Los Angeles, Mike Tyson suffered a medical emergency, might have been an ulcer, according to these reports. He became nauseous and dizzy due to an ulcer flare up 30 minutes before landing. So I don't know, man. This isn't the first time that you've kind of predicted stuff.
Yeah,
And I want to get the timing of this attack because 9:46 Eastern, did it happen as Tyson was going? I don't know, man. You got
all
some
I can say
power
is
there.
that I don't want anything to be wrong with Mike. None of us do. But if anything can get him out of that situation, I don't even know what to call it, that carnival-esque so-called fight, maybe something like this would scare some sense into him, and it'll go away. Interestingly enough, I just saw Ryan Garcia, who I know we're going to mention, said, "Hey, Uncle Mike, I'll fill in for you. I'll take the fight." So, and Jake Paul responded with something. I didn't pay much attention to it, but that'll lead us into Ryan Garcia news.
Yeah, as expected, the B sample turned up positive for the banned substance ostarine. And because of that, the ball is now in the New York State Athletic Commission's court. As for the penalties, they include a fine, a suspension, maybe a change of result to no contest that could restore the zero on Haney's loss column. But that said, Haney's chin, his body, and his brain still feel the effects of those three knockdowns and what was a pretty solid beating. And when he enters the ring again, Garcia, or no, not Garcia, but Haney,
Right.
against reportedly mandatory challenger Sandor Martin, he's not going to be the same fighter as the one who climbed into the ring in April.
Yeah.
And as for Ryan Garcia, he ran it on social media about all of this being fake news and loving steroids and so on. I don't think he loves steroids. I think he was just being sarcastic, but it seems like par for the course as far as Ryan Garcia and social media. Your
Yeah.
thoughts on the fallout and everything?
No surprise. He apparently had some hair test with all that grease in his hair. I don't know what it showed, or what it will show. But it wasn't done in correlation with VADA or anything else. It's just he claims he had a hair test. Bottom line, I said to you a few weeks before the fight, I thought Ryan might be juicing. Was just a guess.
Another one of your predictions
And it looks like he did. And what his future is, what he should be. There should be severe. I mean, I actually think when a guy does that, he should have to fork over his entire purse. I really do. That would be a detractor from these guys doing it. The entire purse gone, and a suspension. We'll keep everybody posted. And I know we got some news before we go to a break on the Towering Inferno, who we'll see at the International Boxing Hall of Fame 35 next week. Sebastian Fundora and his sister Gabriella will be there. But you've got some Fundora in-ring news, right? A possible fight.
True. And as far as Bill Haney was concerned, he was calling for a lifetime ban from boxing for Ryan Garcia. So he seems to be on your side as far as the penalties. But as far as Fundora, he is scheduled to defend his WBC and WBO belts against former three-belt welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. this October. The fight is scheduled for Spence-friendly Dallas, Texas. And if the Dallas Cowboys schedule permits, it will be staged inside Jerry World, AT&T Stadium. Does Spence deserve this fight? Of course not, especially since this will be his first fight at 154, and because he'll be fighting for the first time since getting obliterated by Terrence Crawford last July. But the reason I think this is happening is because this is what the PBC wants. First, there will be no rematch with Crawford, despite the mandate in the contract for their first fight. But the PBC has to take care of Spence financially somehow, and this is probably their way of doing it. And second, remember how Spence was brought into the ring right after Fundora defeated Zhu. So that planted the seed, and now the PBC is watering that seed. Are you surprised that this match was even made? And
Oh,
what do you think?
nothing surprises me in boxing, but I think that it's not a healthy situation for Errol-Spence. We both think that he might never be the same, not just from the fight with Crawford, but I think everything outside the ring. We've chronicled it all over the years. Car accidents, detached retinas, alcohol. I think it's all caught up with him, culminated with the Crawford fight. And certainly, if he was going to come back, it should just be let's see where I'm at type of fight, not against a guy like Fundora, and certainly not for any kind of a title shot. It's ludicrous to me. And we'll get a chance to talk to Fundora, of course, next week.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He'll be at the Hall of Fame.
And speaking of the Hall of Fame, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, what do we got coming up? Speaking of the Hall of Fame.
Well, I mean, I think this is the 35th annual celebration. We will have a number of people being inducted into the Hall of Fame, celebrities, all the events that have made Hall of Fame weekend the event that it is.
Year 35.
Year 35. And this will be, I think, my 30th trip up there. So,
yep. And I didn't mention it at the top, but we have a special guest that'll be joining us. And since I didn't mention him in the beginning, I'll just wait until he's on with us in our third block. And he is a gentleman that will be inducted along with so many greats. Year 35, the International Boxing Hall of Fame. We'll talk about it right after this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up, I can get tougher, I can get faster, I can get stronger, and then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on In This Corner, the podcast with Lee Groves, who's attended nearly every one of the International Boxing Hall of Fame weekend inductions. He'll be at it again. I'll be serving as host, a position that I've had there since 2016. And Lee is kind enough. He's going to kind of run us through all of these inductees, except for one who will join us later. Right. But go ahead.
All right. Well, let's go through the roll call of honorees. Because there was an apparent tie, there's going to be 4 male inductees in the modern category. And the first one is Ricky Hatton. Hatton has been on the ballot for several years, and he finally broke through because, you know, he began his career with, I think, 43 victories in a row that included 2 belts at 140 and 147. He was Ring Magazine's 2005 Fighter of the Year. He was extremely popular because of his aggressive style in the ring and his everyman persona outside it. He certainly was very honest with us when we had him on the podcast earlier this year, was he not?
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed my time with him. He laid it all out there in the ring. The only guys who really convincingly beat him will also be first ballot Hall of Famers. You know, well, one of them's already in there in Floyd Mayweather.
Right.
And then Manny Pacquiao will be as well. You know, I think Ricky got everything out of that little body of his, and you know, he made the most of it. Probably an overachiever in many ways, and he just worked so hard inside the ring.
He really did, and he really busted his tail in training because he would gain all that weight, and then he would just work it down. But every time he made weight, and he performed, and he gave it his best every time.
And the Brits would certainly say there's only one Ricky Hatton.
There is indeed, and he'll be inducted in just a couple of weeks. The next one is Michael Moore. And like Hatton, Moore gets in after being on the ballot for a few years, and his record speaks for itself. He was the inaugural WBO light heavyweight champion. He made 9 defenses, scored all by knockout. He had 2 reigns as a heavyweight champion, one of which as a unified champion. And he's the first southpaw ever to capture a widely recognized share of the heavyweight championship. I remember seeing him seated next to Matthew Saad Muhammad underneath the tent at the golf tournament one year. And while Saad Muhammad happily signed autographs, Moore kind of kept to himself, and that's kind of how he is. What's your relationship with Michael Moore? What are your thoughts about him being inducted?
I called 1 or 2 of his fights. I forgot which one. I think it was when I was doing with CSI Boxing.
Mm-hmm.
But what I always think about with him is how great, if he could have just remained a light heavyweight, how great of a light heavyweight champion would he have been? I mean, would we be talking about him alongside, a Bob Foster or a Michael Spinks? I think we would. And he was just so talented, so devastating. Don't think that it was realistic given his body, and his body was able to do some amazing things at heavyweight, although it happened to him against, George Foreman. But I certainly think he's a Hall of Fame fighter.
Yeah, at light heavyweight, he was so clean and crisp and accurate. We talked about Joe Louis last week about how crisp and accurate he was and how devastating a puncher he was. At times, Michael Moore was like that in his title fights. He was really a machine that Emmanuel Stewart really crafted. The next inductee is the antithesis of Michael Moore as terms of power anyway, and the way he operated in the ring. But Ivan Calderon was one of the best small men of his era. He competed in the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. He won world titles at 105 and 108 as a professional. He made 12 successful defenses at 105 and then had 6 more at 108. And at his best, he was a defensive master who made opponents look silly, and he had the reflexes to make them miss and make them pay. We had him on the show as well, and I know you had some good times with him along the way.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and you and I had been pushing for him to get in, and with anybody we could talk to, we both felt that this is a little overdue, I think, for him, given what he accomplished. But another great former Puerto Rican fighter, and the little guy certainly deserves to be in there.
Yeah, and the next is another inductee who has been very popular. People have been pushing for him for more than a few years, and that is Diego Corrales. And like his other classmates, Diego had to wait for his induction day. But unlike the others, he sadly won't be there to accept his plaque and his ring and make his speech because he died in a motorcycle accident in 2007. He was just 29 years old. But he was one of his era's most beloved action fighters, and his twice off the floor 10th round TKO over Jose Luis Castillo in their classic first meeting may well have propelled him into the Hall of Fame, albeit many years later. However, he had other accomplishments, such as being a 2-division world champion, and he beat the likes of Acelino Freitas and Robert Garcia, Angel Manfredi, Derek Gainer, among others. What stories do you have on Diego?
Well, spent a lot of time with him. Fortunately, I still get to spend a lot of time with Michelle Corrales-Lewis, and she is, of course, the CEO and president of the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. But Diego, we did a fantastic in-ring, with him. I'm laughing because I remember there was some point during it that he was making a point about his power, and it was thundering and lightning, and there was this big crack of thunder and lightning, and all the lights went out for right as he was demonstrating that. But speaking of him, and speaking of that, a great fight, here's a couple clips from Diego on a classic episode of In This Corner, talking about that fight with Castillo and how he would like to be remembered. as a fighter and as a man. Here's Diego Corrales.
And he was smart. I had reached for it all night long. He kept working it, kept working it. Perfect setup shot. He feigned the jab to the body, came with left hook. Now, the thing was, I hadn't given my hand up there quick enough to catch it. This was a feint, so it wasn't going to be down there. And he just brought his left hook right on the butt. I mean, right on the chin. I mean, when you watch that replay, it's square on the chin. Great shot, crushing shot. Hurt. Remember trying to, look at get the count, look at my corner, let Joe know everything's okay. Looked at Michelle, let her know it's okay. Gave her a little wink, of course, she's been in tears the entire night. So, once I got all those things done and bounced on my feet and got ready to go back to it.
You gotta get inside on him now.
Time in, let's go.
You have the ability to inflict punishment. You didn't lose your power, even after all you had absorbed.
Yeah, I'm always gonna be strong, but that's my mental. That's just me not willing to let it go. That's just, I'm gonna still cage mentally, and I'm gonna hold on to what I believe. I'm gonna fight for it to the end, and I believe that there was no way he was gonna beat me, even after the second knockdown. I thought there was no way he was gonna beat me. Now opportunity presented itself. Of course, circumstances had to be just right, and they were. I saw him just run in, and he was throwing his right hand with his left hand down. And the first time he threw it, I was like, okay, if he does that again, I'm gonna get him. And I waited for it, threw left hook, right hand, and there the right hand was. Right hand was right on the button. Left hook missed, right hand was right on the button. In there was somebody who was able to give me as well as he got it, and fight me tooth and nail every step of the way, heart and soul, all the way through the fight. To be in there with a guy that caliber and just able to do that was unbelievable.
And thank you for giving me my first Warriors test. Tell him he'll always have my respect.
What did you learn about yourself? Anything new in that fight or in that 10th round?
I got confirmation. That's one thing that I got confirmation. I've always said I was one of the toughest men out there and that I was willing to take whatever it took to prove that I am one of the best out there. And I did that. I showed that I'm not only one of the best fighters in the world, I'm one of the toughest fighters in the world. I find at the level of gladiator, which is a little bit above a fighter. Just willing to go through whatever it takes. And there's not a lot of us left.
How do you want to be remembered as a fighter and as a person with those fans?
As a fighter, how do I want to remember? One of the baddest SOBs that walked. I want people to look at me and go, that dude fought everybody, was not afraid of anybody, and I loved it. I want people to look at me that way. I want them to say, man, Chico was a bad boy. Wasn't afraid.
And as a person?
As a person, the only people that matter are my kids and how they see me. Those are the only people that matter. As a person, when the day is all done and they drop me to that ground, the only people that I should be able to affect are my kids and my wife.
Diego Chico Corrales as we move on, Lee.
Yeah, we move on to the old-timer category. This is the early era old-timers. And the honoree this year is Luis Angel Firpo, the wild bull of the Pampas. And he is best known for his tumultuous title fight against Jack Dempsey in 1923 that featured 11 knockdowns in less than 2 rounds.
How many?
Unfortunately,
11?
11 knockdowns. Unfortunately for Firpo, he was the recipient of 9 of those knockdowns, including, I think, 7 in the first round. And while he was stopped in the second round, he was also known for his victories over Gunboat Smith. He was a prominent heavyweight of that era. Bill Brennan, who also fought Jack Dempsey, and Jess Willard, the same Jess Willard that Dempsey knocked out to win his championship. One of his era's biggest punchers. and Argentina is getting its day in the sun.
Didn't he knock?
And then we move on to the
Did he knock Dempsey out of the ring in that fight?
He did.
Yeah,
And there's a
thought so.
famous oil painting to that effect.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most famous scenes of the 20th century as far as boxing and sports. It was just an immortal moment.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Well, then we move on to the women's modern category. And the honorees this year are Jane Couch and Anna Maria Torres. Couch, I think, is getting into the Hall of Fame because of the doors that she opened by winning a lawsuit against the British Boxing Board of Control in 1998. And in doing so, women earned the right to box in the UK. And she seized on the opportunity by winning belts in 2 weight classes. She was awarded the MBE for services to sport in 2007, and now she gets to make her speech in Canastota. From what I heard, she's a very lively personality, so it'll be great to finally meet her. And as for Torres, she turned pro by beating a future Hall of Famer, I think, in Mariana Juarez. She won the WBC Super Flyweight title twice. She recorded 10 successful defenses, and she was one of the few boxers ever to compete in North Korea. So it'll be nice to see both of them getting their just due. And then we move on to the trailblazer, Teresa Kibbe, who, like Jane Couch, I believe, is being honored for her deeds outside the ring and the history that she made in it, not just wins and losses. She took part in the first women's boxing match to be televised nationally in the United States when she fought Lavon Ludian on the CBS Sports Spectacular. Remember that series?
Oh, yeah.
She and her sister Darlene Buckskin were the first 2 Native American women to receive professional boxing licenses in California. She finished her career with a 10-3-4 record with 3 knockouts, and one of the women with whom she shared the ring was fellow Hall of Famer Marion Tiger Trimiar, who was honored a couple of years ago. I think it was during the trilogy, was it not?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now
Right?
we'll move on to a couple of guys that I worked with over the years, Wally Matthews and the late Nick Charles.
Yeah, they make up the observer class this year, and I had a chance to work a couple of shows with them. They were the broadcast team when boxing was on the Versus channel. Used to be Outdoor Life. I don't know what it is these days, but Matthews was a boxing writer good enough to win the 1994 Nat Fleischer Award from the BWAA. He was a ringside commentator and a roving reporter for boxing telecast, and he served as the president of the BWAA from 1989 to 1993. And as for Nick Charles, he was the voice of Showbox, the new generation, for nearly a decade, and he was the 2007 recipient of the BWAA Sam Taub Award for excellence in broadcast journalism. Unfortunately, he was forced to step away when he contracted the bladder cancer that would eventually cause his death in 2011. So tell us about Wally and Nick.
Well, Wally, I used to have him on the show all the time when I was doing radio, and he, that's back when we had real journalists, real writers covering boxing, and I did some television with him. Nick and I did a few cards together, including Layla Ali and Christy Martin, for example. Nick and I did that call, and Nick was a great guy, and he he had a little passion for wine, as do I, and we drank some wine together, and he's just a wonderful dude, and he reached out to me about, I think, just like over a week before his passing, and I really liked him.
Yeah, and Wally?
Just as I said, Wally was, did some radio, was always on my show. Very knowledgeable guy, very opinionated guy, very New York dude. And I look forward to seeing Wally in Canastota. I think, he's deserving. He covered it, especially when it was really being covered by, so many great writers, real journalists that covered the sport for their newspapers.
Yeah, I remember watching Wally Matthews on the Triplecast in 1992, Barcelona. And I remember there was a fighter who eventually became a world champion as a pro. He was known as Leonard Duroftai back then. He would be known as Leo Durin as a pro. And he was so impressed by Duroftai's body attack that he gave him the nickname Smokin' Joe Duroftai. and he would, of course, he would go on to win a championship as a pro. And then we move on to the non-participant class. And the thing about this year's class is that all three have appeared on this podcast. And the first is Kenny Adams, who was the assistant trainer of the 1984 U.S. Olympic squad that won 9 gold medals. And he was the head coach of the 1988 team that won 8 medals, including 3 golds. He guided 26 world champions, and at age 83, he's still active. Yeah. You and I have really pumped Kenny to be inducted, and he's just so richly deserving, don't you think?
Yeah, and you know, interestingly enough, one of the shows I did with Diego Corrales, it was Kenny Adams that drove me over to his house. With Diego, when Diego was in the car, because I think Kenny worked with Diego amongst so many other world champions. You know, it's a little overdue for Kenny. I am so glad that the International Boxing Hall of Fame has him in there, where is so deserving. One of the great minds, and I'm glad he can, you know, he's still there, because he's had a lot of health issues, Kenny has. So I'm really happy that look forward to seeing him next week.
Yeah, and the second honoree is Jackie Callan, who famously guided James Toney to world titles in two weight classes. And she is going to be the first female manager that ever enshrined in Canastota. So we had her on the show as well. She I think she's 78 years old, but she just has so much energy and lovely personality. You
had to deal with James Toney. You had to have a lot of damn energy if you dealt with James Lights Out Toney. Of course, Meg Ryan in the movie about her, she had a lot to say about that movie. Some things not so she wasn't so happy with, but it'll be great to see Jackie. And that's the thing. This is the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and you get so many. There are people that think, oh, it should only be fighters, only pugilists. Poppycock, if that is a word anymore. She deserves to be in there. Believe me, it wasn't easy for Jackie to carve out what she did in a sport, being a woman, and in a sport like boxing. So there's one more observer, the non-participant.
Non-participant,
and this person joins us right after the break.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back, final segment in this corner of the podcast, 123, and joined by the final member of the 2024 International Boxing Hall of Fame inductees. There he is right there. There he is right there in the program. More importantly, there he is right there at the bottom of the screen. He is publicist extraordinaris. Fred Sternberg joins us. First off, you got to tell us where the hell you been. You just got off your Learjet from marrying. Tell us the story. Marrying off your son.
Our son Sam got married on Sunday in Agora Hills, California. Lovely girl, great family. And we did a brunch yesterday, and then we caught a late flight out of Burbank, and I literally just sat down within 30 seconds of when you told me I was either going to be on or off if I wasn't on. So there you go.
Well, we're real proud of you. We've got something pretty powerful going on here, Lee and I do. Every time, we have somebody and we want to, and I have nothing to do with the voting or anything like that. But when we really will somebody to be on, once you got on the ballot, I was pretty excited for you. And Lee, we've had others, right? That we've Kenny Adams, in fact, that's going in with Fred.
Yeah, Kenny's
And
great.
Jackie Callan, his other
Jackie
classmate.
Callan, yet another one. Tim Ryan, who.
Yeah.
So, well, tell us who amongst the cast of characters you said your family and others. What about some of the fighters you've worked with over the years? There's been so many. Are any of them going to be able to in attendance?
I really don't. It's been so crazy with my son's wedding and then all these, projects, the accounts that pay for these weddings, have been kind of busy. But I don't know. A lot of people, a lot of your colleagues from the media say they're coming up for it, at least on the East Coast side. I think we were just discussing, Jim Lampley said he's coming up. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I think it's kind of interesting. You as a publicist, I was telling a story today, and I don't know, did you ever get a chance to meet Murray Goodman?
I didn't. I knew Bobby a little bit,
Yeah.
But Murray was just before my time, though. He was around, but I was still wet behind the ears in D.C. And I remember when he passed away and calling Bobby and giving my condolences, but I don't think I ever met him.
Much like you, great guy, a little different than you. You always have a smile on your face no matter what's going on. Murray, on the other hand, was a little bit of a cantankerous, but I loved him. He kind of fell in love with me as a young lad, young pup coming up in Miami, and I did some stuff, and I remember I told you the story, Lee, a couple of times in Miami when I was just a little reporter with a $19 tape recorder. There was a title fight with a couple of Cuban fighters, I think, and he rushed me in there in the dressing room to be the first ones to interview them. Meanwhile, the really big-time press from Cuba or Puerto Rico, wherever, were standing by. I didn't know how to speak any Spanish. I didn't have an interpreter. So boy, did I fake that one. But as years would go by, Tyson was fighting Bruno. I think it was at the Las Vegas Hilton. And I had a credential, and Murray yanked it off of me and said, "Don't worry about that damn seat. I've got you an A-list seat. Come with me." And he threw somebody that was sitting next to Henry Cooper out of ringside, and I got to sit ringside for Tyson Bruno. Remember that fight that featured the boom, the great uppercuts? Murray was a fantastic guy. So are you, Fred. You're so deserving. Maybe all of these distractions, though, are good because it kept your mind off of what's going to be your big speech next week.
There's a speech?
Yeah. Minimum. I think it's got to be at least 47 minutes. As I flip it to Lee.
Well, that's about how long Jose Sullivan talked when he had his induction. Oh, my goodness.
You know who spoke longer than anybody? Let's get ready to rumble. Michael Buffer's speech was 3.5 days, and he's famous for what? 5 words, and he went. It was hilarious. But anyway, go ahead, Lee.
Okay, paint the picture for me. How did you find out that you were being inducted into the Hall of Fame? What were you doing? How did you find out?
That's a good question. I was literally sitting where I'm sitting now, pretending to work like I do now, and I saw my cell phone light up, my flip phone, and I see Ed Brophy's name light up, and I knew it was going to be announced that day. No, it was within a couple weeks of it being announced. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is very strange for Ed Brophy be calling me at this time of day. And I know they don't call to tell you don't get in. So I'm like, So I answered the phone. It was a lot of small talk for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then he gave me the word. And nothing prepares you for this. It's just, and you try to think of something profound to say. And I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. It was like, thank you. And there isn't a recount. I was assured there would be no recount. It was great. He's terrific. There is a better guy to represent this institution, and he just told me the meaning of all. Even though we've all written about it, you've lived it. You live it for every year of this, and but the import of it, I mean, it just comes crashing down on you. And as I was getting the word, my wife had come into the house from running an errand, and she hears me say hi Ed, or talking to Ed or something, and she's like, I go, yeah. And we were just shocked, just shocked. It was great.
So how did the rest of your family and friends react? I'm sure they were just
they went
overjoyed.
crazy. I mean, I thought, okay, this is a big deal. They thought it was a huge deal, and I mean, it's been a national holiday since it was announced here in this house and in all the satellite family homes. It's and at this wedding, everyone's coming up congratulating me, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is coming up. Right now we've been involved with this wedding. It seems like for 5 years. It's only been a few months, but it just seems like that, and all of a sudden now it's one thing goes into the next thing, and I guess that's life.
By the way, hopefully my daughter got married just 2 years ago, and I hope you got, because you're the father, I hope you got off easier than I did, because being the bride's father, I had to pay for the whole thing. It was great. It was a lot, but hopefully you got off easier.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, never mind. Keep going, Lee.
Well,
it's all worth it.
Yes, it is.
Looking back at your career, one of your most notable clients was Manny Pacquiao, of course, for whom you began working in 2005. Now, in 2008, he experienced a spiritual revival, and from my outsider's viewpoint, he appeared to be a changed man. Can you compare and contrast working with Manny before the conversion and after?
Yeah, I mean, there seemed to be trying to think of the right word. Maybe it's maturity, but he seemed different after, he became born again, and it was he carried himself a little differently. And I think all of a sudden, this is when we started seeing, not that he didn't care about people before, he did. He was always giving money to whomever. People would be lined up outside his house, outside the gym in Hollywood. Wherever he went, he was always trying to take care of people as best he can. I think with this new maturity that he found, there came some wisdom that he wanted to find a better way to help people. I think one of the ways was through the church and through, spreading the word of Jesus that he was doing. I think another thing was his interest in government and using government to help those who weren't getting the help from government who should have. And that's when he ran for Congress. I think it was a second time, and he was successful. And then he became a senator. And I think he just knew, rather than, and not to diminish what he was doing, giving out of personal funds, but there are a lot larger funds held by a federal government. And he knew if he could become somebody of influence there, he could represent and bring money back to the province he represented and the people he represented who really needed it. And there's been a lot of corruption throughout the years in the Philippines government. He knew it, and he knew where it was, and he was determined to right the ship and try to get more funds to where they were earmarked and belonged. And I think that was the beginning of all of it, was when he had this conversion after the Marquez fight.
Yeah. And there have been some rumors about Manny. First, he was going to try and be on the Filipino Olympic team. That didn't come to pass. There have been rumors that he wants to make a comeback to the ring. Do you know anything about whether, what the status of that is?
I think if he could get one more big fight and go out, I don't think he wanted to go out with a loss. The Ugas fight was a kind of a strange fight, and you can't say he got it on short notice, because Ugas got it on the same amount of notice. So the better man won that night. Manny was just fell a little short, though he did give a good fight. But I think he wants to go out on a win. I think he'd like it to be a big fight. I'm not sure where that would happen. I think ideally, if he had his wish, it would be in the Philippines, in Manila or something like that, where the whole country could come in. But for the fight he's probably talking about, we're probably looking for a well-funded venue. I'm sure everyone's looking at Saudi Arabia and or Las Vegas or wherever. And I think if that could happen, and I have no inside knowledge about this, but knowing Manny, I think he'd like to go out with a win instead of a loss.
My advice, Manny, don't do it. There's always going to be one more fight. Retire and come hang out with Fred Sternberg and Smitty and Lee
Come
at
to
the
Minnesota.
International Boxing Hall of Fame with all your faculties. You got anything else, Lee?
I have one more question.
Okay.
You know, one of the more unique aspects of going in as a non-participant or an observer is that they are being honored without having taken any punches inside the ring, at least officially.
That's what you think.
Right. But because of this, some have expressed a form of imposter syndrome because they're being honored alongside those who did take punches inside the ring, while others are justifiably proud that they're being honored. What side of the fence do you land on?
That's a good question. And, and I've thought about it. And really, I think the primary purpose of the Hall of Fame, any Hall of Fame, at least athletics, should be the athletes who made it, so popular. And I mean, where's the sport without the athletes? And you're right, they're the ones taking the punches, and they're the ones doing all the hard work. And I think also the trainers deserve to be in there. I mean, there should be no argument there. I can see why people wouldn't want non-participants in. I think if you look at least from my field for public relations, there is an important purpose to it because it helps to sell the fight. And if a fight sells, you have more fights. And the more people become attracted to the athletes or the events, the bigger the sport becomes. So do we make a contribution? Yeah, we do. And a lot of people, especially in my field, aren't known at all outside the industry. So but I understand exactly how they feel. I feel like I've made a contribution. Do I feel like I've made as big a contribution as Manny Pacquiao? No. Have I made as big a contribution as people in journalism like the two of you? No. But, I have helped facilitate you and your brethren in getting this, the access to the athletes.
Well, got me that interview right there with Pacquiao. Who knows? But here's you're such.
How did that happen?
It's such an integral part of boxing. The publicist, I got to know so many of them over the years, and we'll go out with this question. And now you are a Hall of Famer. You're at the highest echelon of your participation in the sweet science. What advice would you give to the young Freddie Sternbergs out there all over the country, all over the world, especially in this new age with all of this stuff and everything else going on? And so what would be your advice?
My advice is read and write as much as you can, get involved as much as you can. Don't be jaded by the size of the event. Get grassroots experience. That's what I did. I started in DC with Charlie Brotman back in '85. A year later, I'm with him running a press conference announcing Hagler-Leonard. And I'm thinking, this is pretty good. I'm for this if they're all like this. Well, they're not all like this. And that was the limit of my participation in that event, was that one press conference. Charlie did everything else, went to training camp with Ray and all of that. But eventually, managers and promoters, local managers and promoters would come to us to do local shows. And I got to know these fighters, and I got to, it gave me an outlet to learn how to sell these guys locally and then regionally. And, the two I always look at would be Darryl Coley, who was an outstanding welterweight, and Reggie Green, an outstanding junior welterweight, both from the DC area. They were both world rated. They've eventually fought for world titles. And their manager let me go to town and have a good time. And, we always did well locally. And from that nucleus, we were able to build, and because of Barry Lindy, their manager, he got them both featured many times on USA Tuesday Night Fights, which was a great platform and was a lead up to getting into the HBOs and Showtimes. And they got noticed. And, I was doing all kinds of crazy things to get them noticed, mostly locally. But, when it was time for them and they're in the top 10 and you're trying to get them the Pernell Whitaker fights or the Oscar De La Hoya fights or whatever it was, you got to raise the stakes, and you got to find out who the national writers are and the national broadcasters are. and get their attention. And that's what I would do, all kinds of stupid things that some people liked. And that's how it started for me. And that's usually how it starts for most people, because you build relationships locally and you learn how to do that. And then nationally, it'll come eventually if you're expanding the right way. There's no shortcut.
Yeah, I knew that word was coming. I knew that word. Being my height, I hate that word, but yes,
they can't all be giants like us, Smitty.
no shortcuts. Well, whatever road you've managed to take, it's obviously ended up at the pinnacle, and that is Canastota, New York, International Boxing Hall of Fame 35, June 6th through the 9th. You will both be tired of seeing and hearing me handling the festivities until Sunday, when I hand the baton, or in this case, Mike, to Jimmy Lennon Jr. to actually take over the final day there for the induction ceremony. Once again, congratulations, Fred. Real proud of you. Look forward to seeing both of you. We'll see you in Canastota.
I'm looking forward to it. I've never been. Some people think it's not even a real town. It's like Brigadoon, but I think it's there.
Well, the thing is, once you're there,
yep,
the way you're going in, you'll always be there. At least your face and your story will always be in boxing's title town. Thanks, Lee. Great job.
Thank you.
So long, everybody.